This is part 2 of my summer carburetor video. And I don't really want to be doing a part 2, but this one's got a problem that I'm having a hard time fixing. And I think I know what's going on with this carburetor. So I made an adjustment to the secondary throttle plates a few days ago and then improved the issue that I was having. The issue that I'm having is when you set the idle mixture on this thing and then you go out and drive it and get it good and hot and then park it for 30 minutes and jump back in it, it is extremely lean and idle. So I can set the idle for 13.5 to 1, go out and drive it, shut it off, come back 30 minutes later, start it up, and it will be 19 to 1. It'll barely run. So obviously it's heat related, and I've tried different heat isolators, didn't make any difference. And it doesn't take much heat in the carburetor to cause this to happen. So I'll show you real quick what I'm getting at, and I'm hoping this will be the fix for this. So I think it has something to do with the secondary throttle plates. And the reason I think that is because I tightened them up. Oops, taking out the wrong screws. I tightened them up and it made it better. So it's not quite as bad as it was before. So setting the idle for 13.5 to 1, you get it warm, and it's about 15 to 16 to 1, which it's not too bad, and it will run. So before I made that adjustment, it wouldn't run at all. So I'm hoping I'm on the right track, and I'll show you what I'm doing. The other issue with this carburetor is that I don't have time getting it to idle down. It's a 5-liter engine, and I can back the idle speed set screw all the way down, and it will still idle too fast. It'll idle about 900 RPM. So I'm thinking that the throttle plates aren't seated. So the first thing that I did was I bent this little linkage. And the reason I did that is because as this primary shaft comes off, it's supposed to seat that. It's more of a safety issue than anything else. So as you let off the gas, this is supposed to close the secondary, keep it from sticking open, in which case the car might continue to run forward even with your foot off the gas. So I just bent this. It was at less of an angle. I kind of tweaked it a little bit to give it a little bit of tension up against the throttle plate when you're off the throttle. This is a secondary throttle plate shaft. So now when you let off the gas, you can see that this will put a little pressure on that. I'm going to even bend it a little bit more, so it puts a little bit more pressure on it. But before I do that, I want to verify that the secondary throttle plates are adjusted correctly. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to loosen these screws, drive the shaft home, and then retighten them. And before I do that, I have to loosen the idle plate, secondary idle plate, or idle set. Back this off, otherwise what's going to happen is it's going to hold it open part way, and that'll prevent me from doing what I want to do here. So I'm just going to back this completely off. So now this thing should close completely. Now I'm going to loosen those throttle plate screws. Just have to loosen them. You shouldn't take them all the way out. I've already done this to the primary side, so I'm not going to redo that, but probably a good idea to do it to both. Now I'm just going to drive this shaft completely closed. I'm going to hold it closed. Make sure this is not touching over here. And it's not, it's off. So that little screw is not holding this plate open. And once I get that completely closed, I'm going to snug them back up. Obviously, if one of these screws worked its way loose and fell out, it could mean death to an engine. So Loctite might not be a bad idea, but I just made sure they were good and tight. I'm going to check that with a flashlight. Seems pretty good. Kind of hard to tell. I'm going to beat on the car. The thing about carburetors, any carburetor, doesn't matter who makes it, is many times you won't get one that's right out of the box. You're going to have to do some adjustments to it like this. Okay, so now you can see I have a little bit of play there. So I'm going to tighten it up a little bit more. And all I'm doing here is I'm just going to bend this. See if that's enough. Seems to be about perfect. So now when I wiggle it, I've got no secondary shaft motion at all. So I'll tighten this up. I've just bent it a little bit more. So I've just straightened it out a little bit so that it applies a little bit of pressure against this shaft when you're off the throttle. Now I'm going to take this adjustment up just until it touches the plate and I see it start to open. Probably right about it. The reason you need that to touch is so that the shaft doesn't bind. So, as the Venturi's request secondary flow, if it closes too much, it's going to bind in the bores. It feels pretty good. I don't feel any binding there. So, all right. I think I may have it. I'm going to go ahead and bolt it back on. So the two problems I'm chasing right now is the carburetor runs extremely lean after it's hot. And then if you adjust it to that extremely lean, the next morning when you start it up, it'll run extremely rich, like 9-to-1. So that's what I'm chasing. And the other issue was I couldn't get it to idle down enough. And I know it didn't have any vacuum leaks because I had a different carburetor on it, and I could idle that one right down to 550, 600 RPM. This one wouldn't do that. So I think that these two problems are related. I'm hoping they're related. So I'm going to bolt it back on, and I will give you feedback if it works.
So it's idling at 700 RPM. That's a first for this carburetor. Cold carburetor fuel mixture, I set it at 14.5-to-1. After a hot soak, it crept up where it is now, about 16-to-1. And it's a fairly warm day, It's 105 degrees Fahrenheit outside right now, so I'll cut this carburetor some slack. It's pretty warm out. So I think it's livable for now. Um, as to what causes this, I think that the secondary butterflies, if they're not seated in the secondary bores perfectly, as the carb body heats up, because it's aluminum, it expands at a faster rate than the steel butterflies and allows a bit of extra air past the butterflies when the carburetor is good and warm. That extra air is lean. These carburetors have a secondary air fuel bleed in order to keep the fuel in the fuel bowl fresh and keep it from getting stale. So there's constantly a little bit of fuel trickling through those idle bleeds to prevent that from happening. It's set up lean intentionally so that we can get our adjustment on the front butterflies. But if those secondary butterflies are passing too much air, it overpowers what's going through the primary butterflies and forces it lean. So I think that's what's happening. So hopefully this will be drivable the way that it is. I did do one additional thing. I put a 2-inch phenolic spacer under the carburetor to try and help keep the carburetor cooler. And it did drop the temperature of the carb base from about 148 degrees down to about 138 degrees. So it was worth 10 degrees. So hopefully that will help things out. Luckily, I had the room underhood to do that. In a car, it wouldn't be so easy, but this Bronco has plenty of underhood room, so I could stack that in there and get away with it. All right, I'll keep driving this thing, and if I have any more updates, you'll see them, and thanks for watching.